The retired teacher. Margaret closed her classroom door one last time. 40 years had passed in that small room. She carried a box of memories to her car. Students had filled every corner of her mind. Her husband, Robert, waited at home with flowers. "Welcome to retirement," he said with a warm smile. She laughed softly and set her box down. The house felt different in the afternoon light. The next morning, she woke without an alarm. Silence filled the bedroom like a gentle fog. She made coffee slowly, without any rush. The clock on the wall meant nothing now. She walked to the garden after breakfast. Roses needed trimming along the old stone fence. Her hands found comfort in the cool soil. Gardening had always calmed her restless mind. Robert brought her tea around 11 o'clock. They sat together on the back porch quietly. Birds sang in the tall oak nearby. Life felt slower, softer, and strangely new. Margaret missed her students after just 1 week. She missed their voices and their curious eyes. She missed correcting papers at the kitchen table. Teaching had been her heartbeat for so long. She called her daughter, Susan, on a Tuesday. "Mom, you need a hobby," Susan said gently. Margaret nodded and stared at the blank wall. Something inside her felt hollow and unfinished. She visited the library on a rainy Thursday. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. An old woman sat alone in the corner. Margaret recognized loneliness in the woman's quiet eyes. She sat beside the woman without hesitation. "My name is Margaret," she said with warmth. The woman looked up slowly and smiled back. "I am Dorothy," she replied in a soft voice. Dorothy had moved to town just 3 months ago. Her children lived far away in different cities. She spent most days reading alone in silence. Nobody had spoken to her in weeks. Margaret began visiting Dorothy every single week. They read books together and shared old stories. Dorothy laughed more as the cold weeks passed. Margaret felt something bloom inside her chest again. One afternoon, Susan called with surprising news. "Mom, the community center needs a reading teacher." Margaret sat straight up in her favorite chair. Her heart beat faster than it had in months. She called the center director the next morning. His name was Patrick, a kind younger man. "We have 12 adults learning to read," he explained. "They need patience, dedication, and steady guidance." Margaret arrived on a bright Monday morning. 12 adults sat nervously in metal folding chairs. Some were young, some were old and gray. All of them carried hope behind their eyes. She introduced herself with a calm, steady voice. "I am Margaret, and I love to read." A young man in the front row smiled. His name was Carlos, age 23. Carlos had grown up without books at home. School had never been a safe, quiet place. He had worked since the age of 14. Reading had always been just out of reach. Margaret worked with Carlos every Tuesday afternoon. She never showed frustration or spoke unkindly. She broke each word into small gentle sounds. Progress came slowly, like water on stone. By March, Carlos read his first full sentence. His hands shook slightly as he held the page. Margaret placed her hand over his with care. "You did it," she whispered with proud eyes. Carlos looked up with tears on his face. "Nobody ever believed I could do this." Margaret squeezed his hand and said nothing else. Some moments did not need any words at all. The other students also began to grow quickly. An older woman named Grace learned within months. A shy teenager named Eli surprised everyone weekly. Margaret remembered each student's name and small story. Robert noticed the change in his wife's face. She hummed while cooking and laughed while reading. The hollow feeling had completely gone away. Retirement had found its own quiet meaning now. Dorothy also joined the community center that spring. She helped organize books on the wooden shelves. She greeted every student who came through. Her loneliness slowly faded like old fog. Summer arrived warm and full of bright days. Margaret's class had grown to 20 eager students. The room buzzed with sound and gentle laughter. She had built something real and deeply good. One evening she sat with Robert on the porch. Stars spread wide above the dark and quiet yard. "I thought retirement would feel like an ending," she said. Robert took her hand in his warm one. "Does it still feel like an ending?" he asked. She shook her head slowly and looked up. "It feels like the best chapter yet." He smiled and held her hand a little tighter. Carlos gave Margaret a card at summer's end. He had written it himself in careful letters. Every word was formed with deliberate quiet pride. She read it twice and kept it forever. "You gave me the world," the card simply read. 8 small words that carried enormous weight. She placed it gently on her bedroom shelf. It stood beside a photo of her classroom. Margaret was not just a retired teacher anymore. She was a woman who kept on teaching. Age had not dimmed the fire inside her. Purpose does not retire when people do. The autumn leaves fell across the garden path. She walked to the center on a crisp morning. 12 new students waited inside the warm room. She smiled and said, "Let us begin today."